So today we're going to be taking a look at creating a mandala in Adobe Illustrator. To begin, we're going to create a new document. Please go up to File at the top left side navigation and click on New. You'll get this pop-up appearing in the middle of the screen. And we're going to set the dimensions to 12 inches by 12 inches. So over on the right side navigation, I'm going to change my document to 12 inches. Make sure that you don't get confused in selecting the default of points. But once we have the 12 inches by 12 inches, we're going to hit Create. Now looking at our document, we have a white square. To begin, we're going to be taking a look at a couple different tools. Over on the left side navigation, we currently have the basic toolbar. We need to actually modify our toolbar so we have the advanced toolbar. To get the advanced toolbar, you're going to go to Window at the top navigation. Under Window, you're going to go down to Toolbars and choose Advanced. With Advanced, you're going to see a number of different icons added on to the left side navigation. We're going to be particularly looking at the Polar Grid tool. If you don't see the Polar Grid tool, it's located underneath the Type tool, the capital T. Click and hold on the Line Segment tool, and you can choose the Polar Grid tool. Over on the right side navigation, there's a couple tools if you do not recognize the icons that we're going to be using today. The little club icon is the symbols icon. With the symbols icon, you can see a number of default symbols already placed in. We're going to be adding our own symbol today. Below this, we have the gradient tool, the stroke panel. The stroke panel will allow us to modify the thickness of the strokes. Transparency panel if you're looking to drop the opacity. But we're also definitely going to be using the Pathfinder tool. But over on the left side navigation, we're going to go back over to the Polar Grid. We're going to double click on the icon for the Polar Grid tool. And when you double click on the icon, we're going to see a number of settings that we can modify. To modify this, we're going to change the number of concentric dividers to 4. And then our radial dividers is going to go in 8. You can also look to double that number, go to 16. It's a little bit more complicated for the arrangement, but overall gives it a nicer, more detailed look. Once we have the concentric dividers and radial dividers, you can click OK. And with our Polar Grid tool, we're going to click and drag, hold Shift as you drag to maintain a perfect circle, filling up the majority of your document. We can see we currently have a black outline. If you do not have a black outline, make sure to take a look at the bottom left side navigation, where right now I currently don't have any fill, but I do have a black stroke. Don't necessarily need a fill, but just as an example, you can see what my settings are. Once we have the Polar Grid tool, we're going to look to trim this down so we only have one piece of the pie, this upper right side piece. To get rid of the rest of the pieces, we're going to first select our selection tool and make sure that we have the bounding box still surrounding our object. If you don't have it selected, make sure to click on it so that everything is selected. And then we're going to take a look at our Pathfinder tool. If you do not see the Pathfinder tool icon, make sure to go up to Window at the top navigation, and then alphabetical order, you can find the Pathfinder tool. With the Pathfinder, we're going to be clicking on the first option in the second row. Under Pathfinders, we'll see Divide. You're going to click on that. That's going to help divide up our segments. Then we're going to go up to Object at the top navigation and go down to Expand. Expanding it is going to actually modify the strokes of our shape. I'm going to select OK. And then we're going to go back up to Object, and this time we're going to click Ungroup. Ungrouping it will allow me to be able to modify my document a little bit simpler, but there's still some complications of understanding how to divide sections out. So I'm going to go over to the left side navigation and choose the Direct Selection tool, the white arrow on the left side, second icon. With the Direct Selection tool, I'm going to click and drag from the top left corner, dragging over top of half of the circle. I don't want to go over this middle vertical line. So I'm going to stop a little bit short and release my mouse. You can see that I still have the left side of the object selected, leaving the right side without being touched. Now that I have the left side, I'm going to hit Delete. That leaves the right side of the Polar Grid tool. And I'm going to hit Delete one more time to get rid of the anchor points that are still highlighted blue. Now again, we're going to look to delete out the bottom half of the circle. So again, with the direct selection tool, the white arrow, I'm going to click and drag over the bottom half and hit delete. Once I hit delete, I want to hit delete again to eliminate out those blue anchor points. And finally, I'm going to look to delete out the bottom half of this piece of the pie. So I'm going to click and drag over the anchor points that intersect. You can see that they highlight, showing the different anchors if I move my cursor over top. I'm going to hit delete or backspace again. We're going to still see a little hanger of an anchor point settled towards the top right. I want to click and drag over that specific anchor point and again hit delete. So we're left with one piece of the pie. We're going to use this piece of pie to be our foundation, give us a shape that can be reflected over into other areas. So with the regular selection tool, the black arrow, I'm going to click and drag from an open space over top of the entire object. Now that I have the object selected, I want to go over to my symbols tool. With the symbols tool, I'm going to click and drag from one of the black lines of this piece of the pie directly into the symbols panel. When I release, it's going to bring up a pop-up, symbol options. You don't have to have a name, but if you like, you can eliminate out new symbol and say piece of pie. Underneath the name, we're going to change the export type to graphic, and you're going to click OK on the pop-up. When we click OK on the pop-up, you're going to see that the anchor points are now not selected around the object. We turn this into a symbol, and we look inside the symbols panel, we have a little slice of that pie. We're going to now look to duplicate and reflect these pieces to build back our circle. So with the object selected, I'm going to hit Command C, which is copy, and then Command F, which is paste to front. Pasting to front is just making sure everything aligns, whereas pasting it into the open space is not necessarily going to align perfectly where you would like the object. So now that I've pasted to front, I'm going to go up to Object, Transform, and Reflect. As I reflect, I want to choose the vertical reflect. You can see that it's going to go left to right. I can click Preview just to make sure it's going in the right direction, where I still have the point towards the bottom, and I can click OK. Now I want to drag this over to align the vertical lines together. So I'm going to click and drag from one of the black lines of the object. As I drag, I'm going to hold Shift to maintain a precise alignment. If I zoom in, I may notice that the lines don't necessarily line up. So I'm going to actually use the arrow keys on my keyboard to nudge the lines together. Now that I have these two pieces of the pie together, I'm going to look to select both of them again. I'm going to click and drag from an open space, selecting both the objects. And again, I'm going to hit Command C, which is copy, and then Command F, which is paste to front. I'm going to look to now reflect it horizontally. So I'm going to go back up to Object, Transform, and Reflect. This time I'm going to choose horizontal, add the preview so I can see the display where the point is now facing upward. And I'm going to click OK. To slide this down, I'm going to again grab from one of the black lines of the two objects. I'm going to click and drag downward, and as I drag down, I can hold Shift to maintain alignment. And I want to get that intersect, meeting in the middle. But again, if you have any additional little areas, you may need to nudge the object slightly up. So I can use my arrow keys, just tap it up once, and now I have everything aligned. Now that I have the four pieces, I want to again do another copy. So Command C, and then Command F. Rather than reflect it this time, we're going to rotate it. Rotating it on a 90-degree angle will align and give us the 8 pieces of the pie. I can either go to the top right corner of the object where my cursor shows a double arrow, click and drag to the right, and as I drag to the right, I can hold Shift to get the 8 pieces all aligned. So you can see everything comes aligned. There's no issues. Everything seems in place. Now that we have our pie assembled, we're going to look to modify one of the pieces of the pie. We're going to stay with the original piece of the pie because it will maintain its alignment. So I'm going to double click on one of the black lines of the shape. And this pop-up comes up where it's just confirming that you want to go into the symbol to modify. I'm going to click OK. And we can see that we're now in isolation mode. This little gray bar at the top navigation represents that we're in isolation mode. And all I'm looking to do is modify this shape, not affecting any of the others. The nice part about this is that we're going to only have to design one of these pieces of the pie, and everything else will be replicated in all the rest of the pieces. So you have a few options of how you can decorate this slice. I can use the Shapes tool. Click and hold. You can choose the rectangle, ellipse tool, polygon, stars, or we can look to use more simple methods like the paintbrush. With the paintbrush, I can draw in different designs, whether it's creating lines or using dots. If I click a point, it automatically fills in a dot. Or I can click and drag to create a more organic flowing shape. Or if I want to modify, I can adjust the weight of my brush, reducing it down to a thinner stroke. So now with a thinner stroke, if I click and drag, you get a thinner line going around the design. If I'm unhappy with the design, I can always hit Command Z to undo, and then look to redraw it again. This time I'm going to draw around the edge of the design, looping back and forth, and using the segments to help create the space for me. You can get creative, it's up to you. You can use simple shapes, draw the ellipse tool, once I have a circle created, I can hold down Option, click and drag to create a duplicate. Maybe duplicate this all around the area. Or I can go with the pen tool and draw out a little bit cleaner lines. I click a point, move over to an area, click and drag to help create a curve. And right now I currently have a fill color, but I can switch this over to my stroke. I can hit escape to end my line and then look to draw out another line through the design. Once I have the line, I can hit escape again, continue this process for however many lines you like. Or you can look to mix it up, experiment with different curves or zigzags. Maybe it's looking to change as you get into different sections. Each section can have its own look. I can also look to change the thickness of the stroke. If I go over to the stroke panel on the right side, I can change our uniform stroke into a thin to thick stroke. If I adjust my stroke, you can see how it goes from thick to thin in different various areas. I can select multiple lines holding down Shift, and again look to modify the thinness or thickness of the stroke, creating a little bit more interest, something more dynamic. I can loop it around, replicate the shape, create my own different design, or look to overlap pieces as well. If I want to create a curve that intertwines, and again I can look to modify these lines, give them a little bit more thickness, or change the profile type. So using this method may not seem like we're accomplishing much, but using this method, if I click on my selection tool, the black arrow, and I double click outside of the shape, it's going to reflect into the entire design. You get something very interesting, unique, and dynamic. Or you can look to, again, modify, change out elements. I can double click back into the object, click OK on the pop-up, and then look to modify to create something a little bit more detailed. And don't think you have to stay to simple shapes. If you want to get complicated, if you want to add in details, you may want to build from the inside pieces and draw a more complicated design as you go further out. Just a couple examples that I have for you. You can see how intricate the design can be. We take a close look, just using vertical lines or horizontal lines going up the shape, or changing out the design into some type of web pattern, or looking to overlap as you get further and further out. You can get some very unique designs doing the same process. So again, using vertical lines where lines may intertwine, or you can have this little tying method, making it appear as if it's almost made out of string. So if I double click inside of the shape, all these little intricate pieces are made up to make this shape that more dynamic. Or another final example, you can see how intricate these designs can be. It's just a matter of putting the time in to make something extraordinary. So you can see I tried creating a little bit of a knot method, making it appear as if this is all tied together as one unified piece. So it is now up to you. How can you make yours original, unique, and dynamic? Good luck.